Welcome to Hebraic Insights in the Gospels. Join us every Sabbath on Tsiyon Road Radio for a look at the life, deeds, and words of Yeshua Messiah and his followers from the Torah-centric Hebraic perspective they were originally lived and written in.
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you find rest for your souls. You find rest for your souls. Oh, you find rest for your souls when you walk in his ways.
Today's program is about Matthew chapter 22. What can the parable of the wedding feast teach us about who the remnant are? What is our hope when it comes to eternal life? What should our approach be when it comes to keeping God's commandments? What commandment takes the highest priority? What matters most to Him? And what's the reason we keep His commands? If Messiah is the son of David, then how did David call Him Lord? And how can the answers to these questions encourage and help to build us up in our walk with Yeshua Messiah? Stay tuned throughout today's program for Eliyahu ben David's insight on these questions and more in Matthew chapter 22. And now, here's today's first scripture portion. Matthew chapter 22, verse 1 through verse 22. Yeshua answered and spoke again in parables to them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who made a marriage feast for his son, and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the marriage feast. But they would not come. Again, he sent out other servants, saying, 'Tell those who are invited, behold, I have prepared my dinner. My cattle and my fatlings are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the marriage feast.' But they made light of it, and went their ways, one to his own farm, another to his merchandise. And the rest grabbed his servants and treated them shamefully and killed them. When the king heard that, he was angry, and sent his armies, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding is ready, but those who were invited weren't worthy. Go therefore to the intersections of the highways, and as many as you may find, invite to the marriage feast.' Those servants went out into the highways and gathered together as many as they found, both bad and good. The wedding was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he saw there a man who didn't have on wedding clothing, and said to him, 'Friend, how did you come in here not wearing wedding clothing?' He was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, 'Bind him hand and foot, take him away, and throw him into the outer darkness. There is where the weeping and grinding of teeth will be. For many are called, but few are chosen.' Then the Pharisees went and took counsel how they might entrap him in his talk. They sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, 'Rabbi, we know that you are honest and teach the way of Elohim in truth, no matter whom you teach, for you aren't partial to anyone. Tell us, therefore, what do you think? Is it legal to pay taxes to Caesar or not?' But Yeshua perceived their wickedness, and said, 'Why do you test me, you hypocrites? Show me the tax money.' They brought to him a denarius. He asked them, 'Whose is this image and inscription?' They said to him, 'Caesar's.' Then he said to them, 'Give therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to Elohim the things that are Elohim's.' When they heard it, they marveled and left him and went away." And now, here's some insight from Eliyahu ben David on that portion.
Greetings, friends. Well, our meeting this week is on the theme, You are invited. And this is very interesting. It's a parable. It's about a parable of Yeshua Messiah in Matthew chapter 22 and the value of showing up. Don't ever underestimate the importance of showing up. It's like the first thing, showing up. The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who made a marriage feast for his son and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the marriage feast. But they would not come. The king. Can you imagine that? The king is inviting people. I mean, it's not just Joe Blow down the street. It's the king, right? And his son. And people wouldn't come for that. That's pretty outrageous, isn't it? The leaders and nobles of Israel are the ones you'd expect to be honored at the marriage feast, which is Messiah's kingdom. You might be surprised by this, but I've never got an invitation from the president to come to one of his deals. Have you? Who gets invited to the inaugural ball, for example? It's not you and I. It's notable figures. Well, that's kind of what the point is here, that it was those people, it was the leaders, it was the notable people, the nobles. They were the first ones invited. It was like the religious leaders Messiah was talking to. And they rejected the invitation. They would not show up. Now, just think how things would have been different if they did show up. What if Yeshua told them all about this wedding feast and they said, wow, we get it. We need to honor the Son. We need to show up for this. It's time to make some changes here in the land. They're the leaders. What would have happened? Can you imagine? But that's not what they did, because they wanted to keep their own program going, right? They had their own thing they were doing. So they would not show up. Then he said to his servants, the wedding is ready, but those who were invited weren't worthy. Do you agree with that? That they weren't worthy? They may have thought they were important people. They may have been the leaders of the nation, but they were not worthy. And they proved it by not receiving the Messiah. So it goes on, go therefore to the intersections of the highways, and as many as you may find, invite to the marriage feast. Those servants went out into the highways and gathered together as many as they found, both bad and good. The wedding was filled with guests. So who was it that came to the feast? What was the criteria? Whoever would show up. Now that doesn't strike me as a really high bar. Does it you? You just have to care enough, right, to show up. This is talking about the remnant of Israel, both natural and grafted in. They were asked, and they showed up. They put their faith, their trust in Yeshua Messiah, and they said, yeah, we'll come. We're going to be part of that wedding feast. And that invitation is still going out. People are still responding to it. And who is it that is included? the remnant. And who are the remnant? They're the ones that show up. You know, what you say, I'm not saying it's not important at all, but what you do means so much more than what you say. You can say, oh, I want to be there at the marriage feast, but then if you fill your life with everything but Yeshua Messiah, what are you saying by what you're doing? If you show up for the things that he's doing, then what are you saying? You're saying you really want to be there. Showing up is so important. So let's talk about these remnant. If we look at them, are they the most impressive people? How about the best looking? How about the best educated? How about the most talented? Maybe the most wealthy people? Well, the answer to that is no, 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 and no. That's not what qualifies them. Now, yes, there are people among the remnant who are impressive. There are some good-looking people, probably. There's some well-educated people, some talented people. There might even be some wealthy people, although that's kind of a rare thing to happen. But those are not the things that qualify a person to be there. These people are the ones who actually care enough to come when they're called. It's really that simple. They don't say, oh, Yahweh, you know, I want to do that, and after I finish all these business ventures I'm going to do, then I'll do it. Or after, you know, I do this thing that I want to do, or whatever. That's not what they do. The remnant will prove to be the people who actually show up. Think about it. All the king requires is people who actually care enough to come when they're called. People who show up. Now, why doesn't he need people who are brilliant? Why isn't that a requirement? Or that they're geniuses or super talented people? Why isn't he just picking out those people? Why? Because he doesn't need any of that. He's brilliant enough for all of us. He's talented enough for all of us. He's all powerful. He's all knowing. He can do it. So he doesn't need any of that. All he needs is people who are faithful to show up when they're called. And then he will take whatever you have to offer and make something great out of it. He's the one that does it. That's why it doesn't matter, you see. Why you don't have to be the most brilliant person in the world or the most talented person. Because it really is not about you. It's really about what he's doing. And you can be a part of that if you show up. If you don't show up, you're not there for him to use you. It really is so simple. You know, I've known people, they've gone for years and years, and they keep pushing away the call because they think, well, you know, when I'm ready, when finally I know enough about the scriptures, or, you know, when I have gone through Bible school, or when I've done this or done that, I'll finally be ready and I can do it. It's kind of like this singer I knew. I knew this singer who learned to sing at Juilliard School of Music. And whenever the believers would get together and praise and worship Yahweh, they would ask her to sing because she had this beautiful voice. Invariably, you know what she said? No, I'm sorry, I can't sing today. I haven't had an opportunity to practice. She was too good to sing, right? She doesn't want to be judged that her performance isn't perfect. So she doesn't even enter in to use the beautiful voice she has to lift up Yeshua Messiah. A lot of people have that attitude, and it keeps them from showing up when the opportunity, the time comes for them. They beg off, they say no. I kind of see this parable really being about that on a certain level. Showing up. Who will show up? What I'm talking about here is a certain aspect of the wedding garments explained for us as the garments of salvation. This is the garment that we wear through trust in the blood of Yeshua Messiah. Well, another way of talking about this is grace in Messiah. By grace, we are saved. But grace is not just about pie in the sky. It's about this life. We have grace so that if we just show up, Messiah will take whatever we have to offer and make something out of it, make something out of us. To show up is to say, I care enough about you, Messiah, to be here. I trust you enough to let you use me. This is why it doesn't take the leaders. It doesn't take the most brilliant people. It just takes the people that care enough to show up. That's the program. And you're here. You're here tonight. There are a million things you could be doing right now. A million different activities. But you chose to be here to honor and learn from Messiah and to feast on him. And you're an example of what showing up is really all about.
Stay tuned. Eliyahu has more to share in the book of Matthew after this short break.
House of Israel, weep for joy. I brought you out of the nations.
Would you like to hear more of Eliyahu's teachings? Do you have a question or prayer request and would like to get in touch with one of our volunteers for help? Or do you just want to know more about Eliyahu Ben David and Zion Ministry? Visit our website at zion.org, where you can listen to more teachings from Eliyahu Ben David straight from the homepage of our website. Check out our books, DVDs, internet videos, and other social media outlets. Learn more about Eliyahu and the Zion team on the About page. See what our ministry's mission is on the Remnant Vision page. Send a question or prayer request from our Contact Us page. Or click Join Us in the menu bar to learn about our community site, Zion Tabernacle. To find out more about Zion Ministry, go to zion.org. That's zion.org, spelled TSIYON.org. HIG.
Tear down your idols and throw them away. Judah and
Welcome back. Here's the next scripture portion. Matthew chapter 22, verse 23 through verse 46. On that day, Sadducees, those who say that there is no resurrection, came to him. They asked him, saying, Rabbi, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother shall marry his wife, and raise up seed for his brother. Now there were with us 7 brothers. The first married and died, and having no seed left his wife to his brother. In the same way the second also, and the third to the 7th. After them all the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will she be of the 7? For they all had her. But Yeshua answered them, You are mistaken, not knowing the Scriptures nor the power of Elohim. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like Elohim's angels in heaven. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, haven't you read that which was spoken to you by Elohim, saying, I am the Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob? Elohim is not the Elohim of the dead, but of the living. When the multitudes heard it, they were astonished at his teaching. But the Pharisees, when they heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, gathered themselves together. One of them, a Torah scholar, asked him a question, testing him. Rabbi, which is the greatest commandment in the Torah? Yeshua said to him, You shall love Adonai your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. A second, likewise, is this, You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole Torah and the prophets depend on these 2 commandments. Now while the Pharisees were gathered together, Yeshua asked them a question, saying, What do you think of the Messiah? Whose son is he? They said to him, Of David. He said to them, How then does David in the Spirit call him Lord, saying, Adonai said to my Lord, Sit on my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. If then David calls him Lord, how is he his son? No one was able to answer him a word. Neither did any man dare ask him any more questions from that day forth. And now here's Eliyahu ben David with insight on that portion.
Hello, friends. Shabbat Shalom. Glad to have you with us tonight. I'm excited about our Zion Academy tonight. I think it's about a very encouraging and wonderful portion of Scripture. And so we want to get right into that tonight. We're going to be talking about 3 big questions in Matthew chapter 22. And each of these questions answers things that many people wonder about and things that are very encouraging for every believer. And we're going to get right into it, taking a look at these 3 big questions. We're going to get answers about the resurrection, about the commandments. Oh, how can we keep all those commandments, people say. And about Messiah. This is Matthew 22, 23 through 46. And you know, the context of how Yeshua was dealing with these religious leaders who were essentially his religious enemies. And they're trying to trip him up with questions. And that's really sad because they didn't have the heart to really get what he was saying. It was all about this confrontation for them. Very, very sad. And obviously they came across the losers on that level. But for us, I think the way we need to look at this is as believers, right? And there's a lot of really encouraging things in his words about this, things that from a believer's point of view are really wonderful things for us to think about and be encouraged about. So the first thing was about the resurrection. And of course, the Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection, and that's why they were sad, you see. You've heard that before, right? But, if I didn't believe in the resurrection, I'd be sad too, because just think about that. It's the end of your life. How vain is that? You live 70, 80, maybe 90 years like Jerry Lewis. But then you're gone, and everything you did will eventually fade, and it's as if you were never here. And that's really sad. But that's not our Father's plan. Isn't that great? Now, people have different ideas. But one thing I want to say is, Messiah didn't tell us, oh, you can't die. He didn't say that. What this was about is the resurrection. And what does resurrection mean? The very word means to come back to life. So, in the Hebraic mindset and in the teaching of Yeshua Messiah, the thinking was very different than what we see, for instance, in Christian circles today. And that's because Christianity basically adopted certain beliefs and ideas from the pagan Greek and Roman world. And this has come down to us. So you may have been taught in church that when you die, your soul goes off to heaven to be with God. And that's what your hope is. But that's not what the patriarchs believed. It's not what, for instance, Job believed. He talked about this. He said, in my flesh, I will see God. And it's not what Yeshua taught. And it's not what he did, if you think about it. In Hebraic thinking, our hope is the resurrection of the dead. It's coming back to life right on this wonderful planet Earth we live on. In your body. But a changed body. And if he didn't tell us about this, we wouldn't understand this, because it's not written in any of the scriptures in the Torah what the nature of the resurrection is. He's the one that told us that in the resurrection, we're going to be like the angels in heaven. Now, he didn't say we're going to be angels in heaven, but he said we're going to be like them in the sense that we won't be married. Now, why is that? It's because marriage was originally given for this age. It was, among other things, to populate the earth. But through Messiah, in the resurrection, we're going to be living in the new earth. And he has a special plan for that time period. And basically, if you think of the bride of Messiah that's going to live with him forever, that relationship between the bride and Yeshua Messiah contains everything you like about marriage, only better. In other words, there's a spiritual reality to all of that we can't really comprehend right now, because we're not living now in that time. But that's what it is to be part of his bride. That's what the resurrection is going to be about. It's going to be constantly living in this special relationship with him. Now, sometimes people ask, what will we be like in the resurrection? What about our body? What will our body be like? Well, we have the example of what happened with Yeshua Messiah. He was killed. He was dead. Just as dead as any person that has ever died on this planet. And they put him in the tomb. And the tomb could not hold him. His Father, through almighty divine power, energized his body in a way that nobody can explain because nobody could do it but him. But what happened was he came to life in that same body. He didn't become a spirit being. As a matter of fact, as we read through in the Gospels, you're going to find several times he says, I'm not a ghost, I'm not a spirit being. He's telling us he's a man. But he's a glorified man. He's raised immortal with capabilities that we as mortal people do not have. But we will. Because the scriptures tell us in the resurrection, when those of us who belong to him are raised, we're going to be raised and we're going to see him as he is because we will be just like him. That's what John says. What he is what we will be. So if you want to know what we're going to be like in the resurrection, you're going to find out pretty soon. Because we're going to be reading about this. We're going to be reading about what happened after his death, when he was raised, what he did. And you will see what your hope is. You know, his hope was to one day be glorified. And that's our hope. That is our hope. We will one day be glorified with him. And I think that is such an amazing thing to think about. How real is that? You know, to some people, that seems pretty distant and hard to get a hold on. But if you realize that the resurrection of Yeshua Messiah is our guarantee, then you can start to see how real this truly is. And it's so real. You just think about the apostles, so many of the disciples that were willing to go to their deaths, many of them joyfully, because they were sure of their resurrection hope. This is really an amazing thing for us to think about because it is so real. We're not talking about being off on a cloud somewhere playing a harp. We're talking about being a real person in a renewed earth in the kingdom with Yeshua Messiah. Something all very real in an amazing way. Well, this ties in a lot to this other question. Which is the greatest commandment? And I think this is so famous, what Messiah said, that even people who don't know the Bible very well know this. They've heard this, that the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with your whole heart, mind, soul, and strength. But you know, this is really pretty brilliant when he said it. Sometimes things lose their brilliancy when everybody gets to know it, right? But it was really brilliant when he said it, especially when you think about who he said it to. Now, these are people who thought of themselves as experts in the commandments. So when they're saying, which is the greatest commandment, what are they thinking about? They're thinking about all these details, right? Oh, is keeping the Sabbath the greatest commandment? Oh, is not stealing the greatest commandment? They didn't know, but they're thinking it's got to be one of these different things that you're supposed to do. In religion, generally, people have a very works mentality. Now, I got to tell you, I see this sometimes even in the Messianic realm. We get people who come to our ministry and say, well, you know, I liked a lot of things you had to say, but you don't say the name right. You should say it like this, so because you don't, you're going to hell. Or you said Jesus, and that's a pagan name, and because you said that, you're going to hell. Or you don't keep the Sabbath the way that I do. You don't burn candles on the Sabbath, so you're no good. There's a lot of people like this in the Messianic movement. People who get hung up on a certain thing. And in a sense, what they're doing is they're saying, well, that's the greatest commandment. To pronounce the name a certain way. To do the Sabbath the way that I do the Sabbath. Or some other thing. And you find this a lot. You go to various websites. I know a lot of you have done this. And what you find is many times people zero in on one thing from the scriptures. Just one thing. And then they treat that as if that's the touchstone of all truth. And unless you're doing that, you're totally lost. Well, Yeshua's answer is the answer to that kind of inane ridiculousness, that kind of religious tyranny. Because Yeshua is telling us the greatest commandment has to do with a personal relationship with our Creator. Do you get that? How do you do that? How do you love God with your whole heart, mind, soul, and strength? What is the ritual for that? Does anybody know? There's no ritual, is there? It's something from in here. There's a lot of religious people that don't love God at all. Loving Him comes from knowing Him. You've probably heard that saying, to know Him is to love Him. Well, that's true of Him. How then are you going to love Him? You've got to get to know Him. Obviously, the first thing is to learn His ways. This is why we spend a lot of time in His Word. We're not just doing it so we can show off how smart we are. We're doing it because we want to know Him. We want to know how He thinks. We want to know what His ways are. We do it because we want to do it, right? We want to do the things He says. Not because we think if we don't, we're going to get hit with a lightning bolt. That's really not His character. You see, when you love Him, you want to know Him more. And you want to think like He thinks. You want to do what He does. And so, obeying His commandments becomes something you do. Not in this religious kind of way where you pick out this one and that's really important, but you forget about that one. No, it's a growing process. Every relationship is a growing process. When my kids were little, 2 years old, I expected 2-year-old performance from them. And that was fairly minor. Things like don't touch the hot stove kind of stuff, right? And then as they grew in the relationship they had with me and the relationship they had with their mom, in their capabilities to do more, expectations increased. But why did expectations increase? Was it to make them perform? No, it's to help them grow, to become who they can be. That's what it's about. That's how our Father in heaven is. You know, it's not like he's got this list of stuff and he's just keeping a checklist on you. And if you miss anything, you know, at the judgment, he's going to say, okay, look, I got this list here. You missed this in 2017 in September. Do you remember that? He's not going to do that to you. Not if you love him. It's all about a relationship. Now, Yeshua knows that because he's in this love relationship with his Father. This was not a hard question for him, right? It's not a hard question for him. The whole universe came out of this. The love between the Father and the Son. Everything exists because of this. This is the easiest question in the world for him to answer. And the more we get to know him and his Father, the easier that answer is for us. He is not hard to love. It's just a matter of getting to know him and giving him a chance and, you know, trusting him, being his child, being willing to be vulnerable with him, being willing to admit, hey, you're not perfect. And, you know, if you mess up, you can go and talk with them about it. It's love. And it's great. And it's the way to keep all of his commandments, right? And, by the way, it's the reason for the resurrection. You know, when Yeshua spoke about the patriarchs, if you read about the patriarchs, what you find is a love relationship between the patriarchs and Yahweh. And in time, they did die, but Yahweh gave them promises. And if you understand the relationship, that love that was between them and the Father, it is impossible to believe there will be no resurrection. There's no way the Father who loved them so much is going to leave them in the grave. And if you are walking in that love relationship with him, there's absolutely no way he's going to leave you in the grave. Because he loves you too much. He wants to be with you forever. That's how he really feels. And that's why the resurrection is absolutely certain, because it depends on the love of our loving Father. And of course, here's the one that makes it all possible. The Son. The Son. The Son of Man, the Son of David, the Son of Elohim. He had to be all three to save us. No one else could do it, and of course that's what the answer is to the question that he posed. And that's why he asked the question. And that's why they didn't want to answer the question, because they didn't want to have to admit the truth about him. And don't let anybody tell you that they didn't believe that the Messiah was going to be a divine person. That was part of their doctrine. We have a book, Targum Isaiah, and that Targum was written before Messiah was born by the very schools that we're talking about here in the gospel by these Pharisaical schools. And as you read through Targum Isaiah and you're reading their commentary, you see that they say that Messiah is a divine person. So, what actually happened here when Messiah asked this question, how can he be son of David and how can he be Lord? It's not because they didn't know the answer. It's because they didn't want to say the answer. Because they didn't want to have to admit that he was who he actually is. It was their hard hearts that shut their mouths. It's too bad, isn't it? Because they threw away so much to keep their religious position. But we see people do this today, and we understand that this is how some people are. But when we consider what he did for us, it's really mind-boggling, isn't it? The Son of God, born as a man. What a miracle. The quintessential man, really walking as what a man is meant to be. And really within his person, there was the makings of a perfect human race, if you think about it. Perfectly counterbalancing what was lost by Adam. And he was the son of David. He had the right to be the king. And he was the son of Elohim. And no one else could be perfect, right? Because everybody else, born of Adam, was sinful. There was no one that could be a perfect sacrifice for us. That's why he came. The Son of Man, the Son of David, the Son of Elohim. That's our Messiah. The Son of God became man so men could become sons of God. As you look at these questions and the answers, it's all part of the same thing, isn't it? It's all part of this amazing heart of love of our Father and his Son for us. And unlike those Sadducees and Pharisees, we have eyes to see the truth. And we are able to enter into what has been offered to us. But when we look at these three big questions about the resurrection, the commandments, and the Messiah, we see this perfect harmony of love drawing us to them. And friends, just make that your goal every day, to draw closer, to know him better. Because as you know him better, you're going to keep loving him more. And that's the key to the whole thing, isn't it?
You have been listening to Hebraic Insights in the Gospels. Further teachings and study materials on various related topics and others can be found at our membership site, Tsiyon Tabernacle. Sign up is free. Just go to tsiyon.net. That's TSIYON.net. or click the membership link on the Tsiyon Road website. New programs on the Gospels will be airing every Sabbath on Tsiyon Road Radio. Join us next Shabbat to learn more in the book of Matthew. Shabbat Shalom!
Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you'll find a rest for your soul. You'll find a rest for your soul. Oh, you'll find a rest for your soul when you walk in His ways. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for